Welcome to Summer to Evolve. This is the second week of the Summer to Evolve, and we're real excited about this program. Today's session is going to be Too Talented on Candidate Screening. So we have two amazing guests, Kevin Grossman and Amanda Lenker-Doyle, which will give them a moment in a few seconds to introduce themselves, but really excited to have this conversation with both of them on candidate screening. Just a quick plug for Summer to Evolve. This is Jobvite's program that runs 12 weeks with over 45 sessions this summer across 5 different types of content. And the best part is that it's all free. So if you haven't checked it out before now, please do so. The 12 weeks for Summer to Evolve, each week has a different theme. Last week, we were talking about recruitment marketing throughout the week. This week, we're talking about candidate screening. And then next week, we're going to be moving into recruiting roles and skills, some more operational type conversations. This week, if you haven't seen it yet, please check out the Candidate Screening Best Practices class that was posted on YouTube yesterday under Jobvite's channel. Tomorrow, we'll continue the conversation around candidate screening with a product demonstration on how to qualify candidates faster in the application process. And then Friday, we're real excited. We'll be having the Recruiter Real Talk session, which is really a virtual roundtable discussion with some of our customers on how to screen quickly and effectively with technology. And the website for all of this great content is thesummertoevolve.com, so definitely go and check it out. My name's Carrie Gillum. I'm one of the marketing leaders here at Jobvite. If you do have any questions during today's presentation, please ask on the Q&A panel. We'd love to get some of your questions. If you are so inclined, please check us out on social and do some posting with the hashtag JobviteS2E for Summer to Evolve. And yes, today's session is being recorded, and all registrants will receive an email with the link to the recording afterwards. And with that, I'd love to introduce Kevin Grossman. Kevin is the president of the Talent Board. He has over 20 years experience in marketing and communications. He is the host of the Candy Shop Talk podcast and the author of Tech Job Hunt Handbook. And some of the things Kevin wanted us to know about him, about his summer favorites, is his favorite vacation is Lake Tahoe. His favorite movie is Star Wars. And his ice cream truck order blueberry snow cones, which sounds like a lot of taste in a little bit. So welcome, Kevin, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yes, all the things, Carrie. I like to eat hot dogs and hamburgers. So
wonderful. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. We're super glad to have you here. And then our guest, second Too Talented guest today is Amanda. And Amanda actually comes to us from a little bit different industry. Amanda Lenker-Doyle is the casting director. She is a board member of the Casting Society of America. She has been involved in shows like Blackish, The Muppets, and Fuller House. She has worked with ABC, Amblin, and Hulu. She's got numerous awards, and some of her favorites, Palm Springs, which is a lovely vacation area. Her ice cream order was a strawberry shortcake bar. I think I have to agree with you there, Amanda. And when asked pool or beach, she says calm beach with tide pools. So she knows what she likes. So welcome, Amanda. Thanks for being here.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. So really what we thought we would do today is have these two talented experts come in and share with us, right? Let's talk a little bit about the process of screening candidates for talent acquisition roles that we're hiring for our companies, and then screening candidates or actors for roles, and how can we learn from each other and kind of go from there. So would love to kind of jump in. Amanda, if you don't mind sharing with us a little bit about the process of screening actors for roles, and what are you looking for when you're looking and screening actors?
Sure. So we, casting directors in general are freelance workers, so we have to audition for the jobs that we get as well. So we will interview, we'll get a script for consideration, we'll interview for that job, bring our ideas to the table during that interview, and if we get the job, then we will take the script and break the characters down into specific like descriptions for those roles, put all those character descriptions out to the representation, like the representatives, the agents and the managers that represent actors, and sometimes we'll put them out directly to the actors depending on the role. And then we'll get submissions electronically for the parts. We will go through all of those submissions. Some people we will know, some people we won't know. So we'll take a look at their pictures, their resume, their special skills, any digital or material that they have posted, like a reel, or they're doing a lot of like live slating now, meaning like they'll record themselves saying their names. So if I'm not familiar with them and they don't have a reel to show me, then I can hear them say their name out loud, and at least I know what their voice sounds like, and kind of get a very quick introduction to their energy and who they are, and to determine whether or not they're right for that part. Then we'll decide who we want to bring in or consider for the role. And some of the actors today are offer only, so we will make a list of actors who are offer only and talk about those actors in consideration for the part. And for the actors that aren't offer only, we will cut pieces of the script up to send to them to practice so that they can come in and audition with that material for us, which we then record and send off to the creatives that have hired us, and we all have creative conversations about who is the best person for this part, and then we hire them.
Wonderful. Kevin, how does that compare, right, with our talent acquisition world? How do you think that compares, and where is it different?
We're super boring, number one. No, that's not true. That's not fair to our industry either. But what is fascinating to me is the fact that, Amanda, you're first pitching yourself, right, to be the one to represent and to do the casting, and there's eyes on everything, right? And almost every single candidate that or applicant or actor that you're looking at. In our world, there is a huge volume of folks, unfortunately, to a certain degree, and this kind of relates to the candidate experience research that we do, a whole bunch of folks that are they're never going to interact with a human. So for example, every 100 people that apply for any given job, and I'm just generalizing right now, most of those, upwards of 60+% of those individuals on the average are only going to get automated messages acknowledging that you applied, thank you very much, if you're qualified, we'll be in touch, or a definitive closure, rejection off the bat saying you're not a fit, try again later, whatever the message is. And it's mostly automated at that stage. And then just a much smaller tier will then get that interaction like you do on your end, where I want to talk to them on the phone. I want to do a video interview. Obviously today it's all virtual interviewing that we're doing. So it's a much smaller tier. So it's kind of an uphill battle for employers, because we're in the business of no, unfortunately, in recruiting, and that sheer volume of people today that are applying are just going to be handled with automation. That's the reality.
So I have a question. So is it okay to have this kind of
Yeah, absolutely.
So because it's so different than it's different, but it's not, because
right.
If depending on the role, I mean, we're going to get to that question later, but depending on the role, I could get between 1,000 and 8,000 submissions. It depends on what it is. I have always felt a responsibility to physically take a look at each person. If I might not click on their resume and look at them deeply, but I am at least scanning through to see if they look like maybe they could be right for this part, right? You're saying that the automated process is a programmed system that is catching words that make them right or wrong for the job?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, there's some what's called auto screening, where they may be looking at the resumes for certain keywords that if they don't have them, then they go into bucket X as opposed to bucket Y. And depending on the system, Jobvite platform, for example, and many others in our space, where it's configured in a way that it's kind of funneling people, pipelines, as we call it, into different buckets of where they should go. But yeah, a lot of that, some of that is definitely automated screening. There are those who, recruiting teams who are potentially reviewing some of the resumes that come in, but that may be for much smaller volume too, in a smaller organization where they can do it, number one. And we're also talking about, I mean, what's the time frame for you? I know it's going to vary based on project, but you've got a much longer runway for some of these, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we're doing a film or the series regulars, meaning the people that you see in every episode of a television show, we usually get, if we're lucky, we get 10 weeks for that. But if we're in series on a show and it's the new actors every episode, like Grey's Anatomy, like a patient or something, that's a co-star, and that we only have a few days to find. So it depends on the role. But
well, you found me now. So no, bad joke. I always like to joke that I play HR and recruiting on TV, and that doesn't always fly very well. So there you go. So that's in, because a lot of the times it also depends on, I mean, part of the conundrum in recruiting is also we're at the dependence or the interdependence with the hiring managers themselves that can delay things dramatically. I mean, there may be like, we have these positions open, we need to get them filled within the next 2 to 4 weeks, which sometimes is an aggressive timeline, but that can get stretched out if hiring managers are saying they're the ones who are actually looking at the folks that get shortlisted, right? So maybe, like, I guess maybe equivalent to the production team or the director or whoever makes those other final calls, reviewing these individuals, saying nah, oh yes, I'd like to talk to this person. But that can skew things. But I think there's more of a compressed timeline, and I think part of another thing is that from our vantage point, from the research that we do, there's a timeliness factor, right? I apply for a job. I mean, it's kind of the same thing if I'm an actor pitching myself for a role. There's that angst of waiting to hear back, and what, you know, and am I going to get feedback? And actually, that's a question that I have for you. So I mean, obviously you don't talk to everybody that submits, right? Or puts them that wants to get that part. But for those, maybe that short list that you boiled it down to, if they don't get selected for the part, do you give them feedback?
Yes. Okay. We are often asked for feedback from their representatives. So they'll go through the process, and depending on where they're cut, for lack of a better word, in the process, after that point, we will still either be working through it, or we'll be finished with it and we'll have cast it. And then we'll be asked for feedback for those that didn't get it. And sometimes feedback for those that did get it. You know, what did they do right that got them this job? That we can relay that to them so that they know next time, you know?
I think that's, I mean, in our world, it is more rare, except for very much final stage candidates for any position that's open. But companies, you know, there's a lot of regulations and compliance considerations from federal, state, local levels about what you can and cannot say to candidates. But I think one of the things that we find in our research too is those candidates who are given a piece of job fit qualification status as to why they're not going to be pursued any further always results in a much more positive sentiment from the candidates themselves. Like, thank you. I'm bummed that I'm not going to go any farther, but you told me something that I can now work with going forward. That's important.
Yeah, I think constructive criticism is really important. And I think it's also important to be open to constructive criticism, because that makes you a better interviewer, a better auditioner going forward, because auditioning and interviewing is a separate skill than what you're auditioning to do or interviewing to do, right?
Yeah, that's very true. That definitely, and I completely agree with that. Yeah.
Amanda, or Kevin, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see made in the screening process, either by the candidates or by the interviewer?
I have a good one here.
Do it.
Let's hear the story.
Well, okay, so I would say that I don't want to use the word lying, but exaggerating about your skills or ability, depending on what it is you're exaggerating about, can either be very detrimental or very helpful. But I often find that exaggerating is more harmful than good, especially in the case of like in an actor's situation. When they exaggerate on the size of a role, that's one thing, but when they exaggerate about the ability to speak Mandarin or whatever, and they can't actually do that, that's a problem when it's required for the part.
If you can't do that, why would you ever say that? I can barely speak English sometimes, so there you go. Wow.
So surprised at the things that we have to, and so we'll see, like that's what's interesting to me about the automated system is that like they'll click Mandarin on their resume and I will see that and I will consider them because of it, because that's what the role requires. Right. And then I will, I don't speak Mandarin, so I will have someone helping me who does speak Mandarin watch these auditions and say to me, oh no, they can't actually speak Mandarin, so that's not gonna work for this one, right? So, I think exaggerating or, fibbing, if you will, for really specific things is not a good thing. You have to be able to do what you say you can do. However, when I was young, I've been doing this for like 15 years. And when I was an assistant, one of my first theatrical, meaning television and film jobs was as an assistant in the office that cast The Walking Dead. And The Walking Dead was a pilot that in the first 6 episodes. So we were casting the leads, right, for the series. And we were on week 7, and Frank Darabont had written it and was producing it. And he was the one we were communicating with every day and showing our choices to every day. And he really, really, really wanted Thomas Jane. And I had told them that I'll be the assistant. I'll do whatever you need me to do. Just tell me what you need me to do and I'll do it, right? So every day I was burning, this is before digital file transfers, etc. So I was burning DVDs, and we were shipping them to Frank's house via the courier on the Fox lot every day. So they were like, you know how to burn a DVD and like do a nice menu and stuff, right? And I was like, totally. And I didn't. I mean, I knew enough to like figure it out, and I figured it out. And so we're in week 7, and he really wanted Thomas Jane. Thomas Jane wasn't available. He didn't really understand that, like, if someone's on another television show, because he came from the feature world, he didn't understand that you couldn't do 2 television shows at the same time. And Thomas was on a show and he was not available. And so he was comparing everybody to Thomas because Thomas looks like the character in the graphic novel, and he had done like The Mist for him or something else. He had worked with him previously. So everyone was being compared to Thomas, and no one was right because Thomas was what he wanted. And one night, the Sharon and Sherry's associate Gohar and I were sitting in the office. It was very late. It was like midnight or something. And she turned to me and she was like, I love Love Actually. And I was like, oh, me too. What a good movie. It was a Friday night, and she's like, let's try Andrew Lincoln. And I was like, that's a great idea. So she emailed the agent in London. He self-taped over the weekend, and he actually did email that file to us. I downloaded it, burned it to the DVD, and then, sent it to the courier. The courier got it to Frank. That was on Monday. And then on Friday, I'm hearing, and Frank wouldn't come over to the Fox lot for live sessions. So Frank and Sharon were Skyping every day or every other day, just to kind of communicate about what he had seen and what he liked and what he didn't like, etc. And on Friday, I heard them Skyping, and my desk was in the hallway, and Sharon's office her door was open, and I heard Frank go, "You must really like this Andrew Lincoln guy." And I was like, and she goes, "We do, why?" And he goes, "Because he's been on every DVD since Monday." And I was like, oh, what did I do? And I like ran to her office door and I was like, what did I do? And she was like, I don't know what you do. And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, you know what? Let's test him. So I ran back to my desk. I found the stack of DVD like copies that I had made, popped them into my computer, and he wasn't there. And I was so confused. And then I popped him into a DVD player, and his video was stuck before the menu. So every day Frank had to watch his.
And nobody else could have played that role. Nobody could have played that.
Yeah.
Nobody.
And so this because I didn't really know what I was doing in iMovie. I gave him an opportunity.
You gave him a bump. You stacked the deck for him.
Yeah.
Right? That's great. And and there's nobody else that could have played that role.
Yeah. So
not in hindsight. So,
totally.
Yeah, not in hindsight. So you did well. I've got a related question to that, because we know, so there's this, it's not really a dirty little secret, but it's just this thing that there's serial appliers, people who will never ever in their lives be qualified for the roles that they're applying to, but they're constantly applying to them. And they're doing that shotgun approach, right? Spray and pray. I'm applying for a whole bunch of jobs, not even really looking at them, just and so there's, you know, some companies that say they have little codes banned for life and other things that, you know, that this person's not going to get considered. Do you have like serial actors that are just, you're just like, you again?
Yeah, it's the representatives that do it though.
What's
So
that?
they're representatives that will do that though. They'll submit for everything, and there are absolutely actors that are submitted for every role that are completely wrong for 95% of the roles that their representatives are submitting them for. And so for me, it's more of a, I don't trust this representative going forward than putting it on the actor. But yeah, that, I mean, that's a, you have to know, you have to have an understanding of what you're right for, and you have to curate your pitches, because otherwise the company is looking to hire someone, or the casting director is looking to give this person an opportunity, are going to be like, oh, well, I don't actually know what you are actually right for, because you think you're right for everything.
Well, and the other side of that too, and I don't know so much about in motion pictures and TV, but I know on this side, there's also the issue of just, you know, poorly written job descriptions too, right? Of what is the hiring manager at any given organization? What are they looking for? And if that, usually like the recruiters will sit down with the hiring managers and do what's called an intake form of like, well, these are the things I'm looking for as going to be this person's manager. And sometimes they're just not their best job descriptions. They're not out of alignment. They're unrealistic expectations. You know, I need somebody who has 8 to 10 years of a programming language that wasn't even that old. I mean, you know, things that also need to be fixed. So there's part of that misalignment. I don't know if that actually necessarily happens on your end, does it?
It does, but I'm the in between there, right?
You are,
so,
right.
Like, we'll get really, you know, unrealistic characters that no human being exists, that they've written this character that this is just not a human being that exists, like really specific. And we can do really deep searches for these people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can act. The person that we find that fits all of these descriptions.
Right, that's true.
So a big part of my job is gently helping the writers and the director and the people, the creatives, you know, take what we find on our end and, you know, inspire them to maybe adjust this character slightly to fit the human being that we all love and have found that is a wonderful actor that can play this part, but just maybe isn't completely what they wrote initially.
Sure.
So I just read an article about Carmen Cuba, and her creative team was just, you know, raving about the fact that like she is often, you know, basically helping them rewrite characters, because she's a big casting director. She does Stranger Things, etc.
Got it.
And she is a big part of the creative process, because again, like, and sometimes somebody who's, when we were casting completely open and outside of the box, and we know what they were looking for initially, and where we're starting and what they want, but if we see somebody that's, you know, really interesting and different than what's on the page, then we will present that person to them for consideration, because it might be even more interesting for the project overall if they maybe, you know, consider this individual human who has something different that might make it more interesting.
You know, I think that's a really, really important point, because I know that many different, I guess, progressive organizations that we've worked with in our greater Candy research community, I'm sure some of the Jobvite customers as well, that are willing to also hire for potential. not necessarily it not have to be a direct match. This person has at least 4 of these 5 skills. Maybe there's and there's also this movement now that it's less about jobs. This is probably more on the professional hiring level than hourly workers and other industries. But I think that hiring for the not just the job, but for the career and the project and what needs to get done and how that fits into the greater scheme of the organization to sustain and grow it. Not being so literal about it. I think that's another thing that we've done for such a long time in recruiting is we're so literal about the job description, the requirements for each role that we're hiring for, and try to match that person up. And there's, sometimes that's really too unrealistic. There's going to be, high volume hiring, like maybe equivalent to extras that you look for, right? Where maybe there's not even any lines that they have, or there's a few lines, but it's something that you're going to have a lot of them maybe in a project potentially. There's individuals that are high volume hires. There's call center positions and retail and sales people where it's not the easiest jobs in the world, but they're constantly hiring for them because people leave. They have the churn rate that occurs, unfortunately. And but I think that hiring for potential and looking across, like, how else can this person maybe thrive in our organization? Just the sheer volume. I know we were talking about serial players, but I don't want to doubt the fact that today there's a lot of people that are out of work, unfortunately. And I think that having empathy around, also, how can we encourage candidates to self-select more too, right? It's one thing of what you're looking for as an employer, what you're looking for as a role, but think about, is this really the right place for me? Is this really the right job for me? And helping candidates to better select for themselves, if that makes sense.
Well, they'll be more successful in their ratio of like getting a job and not getting a job if they're more selective and they can present themselves really clearly with a clear definition of like what they're capable of. They can be more successful in getting a job.
I've learned those lessons. There you go.
Amanda, how important is instinct in the screening process, or are there skills or qualities that you encourage others to build and focus on to get a little bit more efficient in the screening process?
Yeah, instinct is essentially the foundation of my job. Like I know a lot of the candidates that are submitted every time, and a big part of my job is just building my Rolodex in my brain of like who I know and what I've seen, and watching and absorbing performances of actors that I haven't met yet in person, but I've seen them in something else or in the theater or whatever. But instinct is a big part of what I do every day. And I think, an example of that is another, again, the casting directors I worked with that cast the Walking Dead, also cast Breaking Bad. And they taught me so much about instinct, in the short time that I worked with them, that it's, when they were doing the pilot of Breaking Bad, and I wasn't there when they were doing the pilot, but they were in series when I was there. And the concept that they considered Bryan Cranston for that part when he had been on Malcolm in the Middle for so long, and everyone knew him as this big comedy guy, and no one, people are, when they say that people are typecast, I think people can be, that could probably be true in the job market too, and like the general job market. Like, you kind of keep getting the same jobs, but you want to be maybe considered for something a little bit different so that you can kind of, move into a different space at some point. So you have to really be open to considering people who aren't necessarily on paper exactly right for something, because they looked at him and they were like, you know what, I think he can probably do it. He can probably do this big drama, when it was so different than what he had been doing on Malcolm in the Middle, and they were right. But that was them, their instinct, and then them fighting for him, giving him that.
And the potential of him being able to pull off that dramatic role, right? after being typecast. I think, and I remember when we were prepping for this, we talked about a little bit about this too. I think that unfortunately I think happens to a lot of current employees, not even necessarily, well, it can happen to anybody for that matter, because we're all perpetual candidates. But if I'm in an organization and I'd like to try something else, unless you have a more progressive open culture where they cross train and they're willing to, if it makes sense that maybe you can try this here, that it is difficult. You're typecast in that sense, right? You're hired for a marketing demand gen role, just as a quick example, and yet I want to start doing more public relations. Is that organization willing to take, you have some of foundational skills that potentially could apply to that. Are you willing to let that person to do that? And at the end of the day, that ends up making that person potentially that much more valuable for themselves as well as the organization. Potential. I mean, again, it's back to that word, but it's kind of a similar thing.
Right. Taking chances on people.
Yeah.
Amanda, one of the questions that's come in from the audience is what qualities are casting directors screened for as candidates themselves? What are the qualities of a good casting director?
That's so interesting. Well, we have to essentially interview and audition for the job in the same way that the actors do. So when we are in consideration for a project, we will get it and read it and kind of make preliminary lists of ideas. And I knew who I was up against once for this really big TV show, and because I knew who my competitor was going to be, I was like, oh, I have to really go all out in regard to my preparation for this meeting, because she should get this job, based on her resume, not me, right? And so I put together like a whole book of ideas, essentially, and not ideas just for the cast, but tonal ideas, because I wanted the creative team that we were interviewing for, to understand that I understood what they were trying to do with this project. So I wanted them to be really clear that I had a vision for their project, that I was open to hearing obviously what they wanted, and helping them kind of build this ensemble to create a world. And I think that's really important, because like they needed to be comfortable with the fact that I could be a creative collaborator, as opposed to just doing the job, and they needed to be really clear on the fact that I understood what they wanted this to be ultimately, right? Because everything is different. I've worked in comedy for a very long time, but I started in drama, and it's very hard to, when you're in the pre-production. I'm a pre-production position in the industry, so I don't know what the end of what the end product is going to feel or look like. So I'm a part of the process of developing that end product, right? So oftentimes we'll do a pilot or something, and I'm like, this could go any number of ways, because this is such a collaborative industry that, like, if we had the wrong hair and makeup person, I mean, honestly, it's like,
sure.
Every department head is so important. If we have the wrong editor, it's over. You know what I mean? Like, if every department head has to really understand exactly what the vision is of the writer creator, so that they can execute that for them. So that's a big part of our interviewing process.
Just curious, based on that, what's one project, show, movie, whatever it was that you helped to hire for and cast, that you were super proud of the end product, and you're like, wow, that's what I maybe saw too, or at least when you were doing the early creative process. Is there something you can name?
Yeah, well, Wayne was what I was talking about. It's a series we did for YouTube Premium, and it was a couple years ago. And when we made the book, I knew who we were interviewing against, and I'm not gonna tell you how I found out, but
Okay.
but so I made this book, and I had seen a screener of a movie called Sing Street a couple months before that, and it didn't really get promoted here in the States very well. So I think it was something that not very many people had seen at that point. And I saw there was this kid in Sing Street, Mark McKenna, and I was like, I turned to my friend Jordan, who I was watching the screener with, and I was like, that kid, the lead kid's amazing, Ferdia, but that kid is gonna be a star, I think. And he was like, okay. And I put him in the book. I put a lot of ideas in the book, but I put him in the book. My partner Chrissy and I, in that meeting that we went to initially. And Sean, the creator, is amazing and had written this beautiful story, had a different aesthetic idea in regard to what he wanted for Wayne, and ultimately, we tried for that aesthetic, and just nobody was quite right. No one was really like working out. And Mark lives over in Ireland. He's from Dublin, and we had him self-tape, and we waited for it. And in the meantime, read thousands of kids. And the show takes place in Brockton, Massachusetts. It's a very hard town, and he's for lack of a better word, like a shit kicker kid. And his car is, his dad dies of cancer in the pilot, and he says that it's basically a road trip movie. Wayne ends up going down to Florida to steal back this car that his dad said was for him, and his mom stole it. Anyways, it's a dark comedy. And we waited for Mark's tape, and we thought, kids over in Europe might be able to do that accent because of, where it is in the world, right? And we were right. Like, a lot of European kids could do the accent and did feel a little bit more authentic than like the California kids for that part. Chrissy said the California kids that didn't feel like they could open a soup can on their own, and so we finally got his tape, and they were like, you know what, we really like him. He's not exactly what was in our head, but let's bring him over. And so that we flew him over, and he was 21 at the time, and on his own, and he didn't have a working cell phone here. And we tested him at the YouTube stages. I had my husband's a DP, so I had him shoot the screen test for me, because he will do a better job. And then the next day, Mark went back to the hotel the next day, and we did chemistry reads, right? And YouTube called, and they were like, we really don't see it. Can we see another take of him doing it more angry? And we were like, okay, well, he's supposed to get on a plane in like 5 minutes, or in like 2 hours. And Chrissy was like, I have an idea. I live by LAX. She was like, go pick him up and bring him back to your house, and Devin can shoot another take. And I was like, before we take him to the airport. And I was like, okay, this is a long story. I'm sorry. And then, anyways, long story short, he was already at the airport. I went to the airport and found him, because Chrissy ended up tweeting at him, because Twitter was the only way that he was responding to anything, because he didn't have a working cell phone. So she tweeted at him. Chrissy, my partner, her husband is an actor, and he has a verified account. So like, he got the tweet, and then he came out of the airport, and I brought him home, and we taped him, and he got the job. But I'm really proud of that, because like, from the very beginning of that process, I was like, I think this kid can do this. And it took a lot of work, but he ended up getting the job.
So you could have made him miss his flight, and then he would have been really, really angry for the take, right?
Well, yeah. When he rebooked this flight, and he ended up staying here, and the next morning we took him back to the airport, because we rebooked his flight for him, and he was like, we were like, do you want to go, get breakfast before we take you to the airport? And he was like, sure. Are there any diners like in Pulp Fiction? And I was like, yeah, okay, we'll find a Pulp Fiction diner. It's like so different than Ireland.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah. But we're really proud of that project. And
that's nice. And what was the title of it again, one more time?
It's called Wayne. We only did one season of it, but.
Got it. No, you've got me hooked on that. It's available to check out?
Yes, it's on YouTube. And you can watch the whole series. And it's a dark comedy, and Deadpool producers were producers on it. So if that gives you any indication of the kind of violence that might be involved there's a little bit.
I got it. I got that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Amanda, one of the other questions that's come in here, do you find that directors tend to go with the same editors, casting directors, et cetera, due to previous relationships, or are they open to different applicants? And I think, Kevin, it'd be good to hear your perspective on our talent world also to that.
Yeah, they do. You'll see if you watch specific directors' films or shows, you'll see that they tend to work with the same people over and over again. I think they end up building trust with those people, like Vicky Thomas, and she does all of the Tarantino films, and you'll see that a lot. But I think too, there's new filmmakers coming up, and you start working with people, and then they'll venture out depending on what they're doing to make sure that the casting director is also hopefully authentically reflecting the kind of cast they're looking to hire as well. I think that's an important part of it too.
I mean, I think, yeah, we tend to always hire for skills and experience, but again, I just go back to the theme of also maybe depending on the position and taking a chance on potential. And there's a lot of job simulation type of tests and assessments that are out there today, that where you can actually test somebody about different scenarios about what it would be like to work in that position, and see and be able to put some of those skills and experience to the test and see how they react to it. And but again, I really do. I lean on the side of potential. Again, it's just going to depend on the role and the timing and the kind of organization and the industry. But yeah.
And Kevin, you're sourcing talent like across the board for like every industry, or you have like
so not me directly, but a lot of the employers that we work with. So we do research with the employers around their recruiting process, their hiring, and how they deliver candidate experience, how that experience is like overall. So it just depends. So many of them, a good chunk of our community are mid-sized to global enterprise. So they're bigger, more complex organizations. There's high volume hiring, a lot of hourly positions, especially if they're consumer based, and whether maybe they've got stores, plants, et cetera, that they're filling with individuals. And that's whole nother conundrum today of getting those people back to the office and to the stores. But so it's across the board of different kinds of positions that they're hiring for at any given time. Probably the biggest industries that we work with are healthcare, technology, financial services, consumer goods, and then a myriad of other smaller representations of other industries.
So healthcare, you would have to have really specific skills to be.
I mean, it depends. Well, yes. So it depends on, I mean, obviously, if you are a nurse or a physician, yeah, I mean, there's very specific people that you're looking for that have the education and the experience to fill those roles. But there's also a lot of administrative positions in healthcare. There's a lot of hospitality, even kinds of positions I know that there's a healthcare organization that we work with that's in the Orlando area, and they compete for a lot of talent, at least in the old world before COVID-19, but with Disney World, for example, a lot of hospitality folks that go just a lot of different kinds of positions. But yeah, obviously for physicians and nurses is very specific, and that's a whole nother discussion around rural areas and how they've struggled to bring doctors and nurses in. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff. So there is an exciting, glamorous part of our world. It's so complex. It is actually, and there is so much going on. And you also look at the bulk of businesses that are made up in the United States. They are smaller businesses that are 10 or less employees, and restaurants and stores and accountants and insurance, and it's a space that I fell in love with over 20 years ago and have never left. So
awesome. One other question that's come in, and then I'm just watching the clock here, but when it comes to candidates or actors knowing what they're right for so that they can curate their pitches or resumes, does that also work on the employer side? So what we would refer to as employer branding. So the importance of the hiring manager or the director to know, what they stand for, what their culture is. How important is that, and how do you see them doing in this?
Is that for Kevin?
Yeah, you want to talk to that, Kevin?
So I think that, and I mentioned this earlier, I think I'm reading a really good book now called Give and Get Employer Branding by Charlotte Marshall and Brian Adams. Am I saying that? Yes. Folks I've known for a long time in the space, but we talk a lot all the time about playing to our strengths when we're marketing us as an employer and why you would want to come work here. And, we've got employee testimonials of why they work here and they want to stay and what our culture is like and all the benefits that you may get and the career development opportunities, all the things that the candidates tell us every year that they're looking for more of when they're researching an employer, whether they spent 5 minutes or 5 hours doing that. But I think there's something to be said about being even, very clear and helping, again, to market themselves as, this may not be for you. This may not be for everybody. This is what we're looking for, not necessarily literally explicitly saying that, but how can we, again, going back to my point about helping candidates also self-select and based on how we're marketing our company, our brand, our positions. Not the best example, but I'll bring it up because I remember a few years ago, there was a lot of hubbub around the fact that working for Amazon.com was a very toxic environment, right? You never worked there. They're horrible people, not from the warehouse all the way up to the corporate level. But the fact of the matter is, it might have been a tougher environment, but there are individuals that thrive in that environment and want to work there, right? So there may be individuals saying, no way, I'm not applying to Amazon, but somebody's like, I want to work, that's a great brand. And I think I can thrive in that environment. So in a way, it's not the best example, but it was in a way, it did actually help some people self-select out that didn't want to go down that path and those who are willing to still take that shot. So.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to Amanda's point earlier of being self-aware. Right. And knowing your culture, I think the Bridgewater company that has such a strong culture that people talk about. And for most of us, it's not the right fit, but for the people that work there, it is.
Exactly.
It's really important to be like your most authentic self and to be really clear and truthful about like what you can bring to the table. And I think, and sometimes too, even the most, what seems like it might be the most insignificant skill or something you've experienced in your life might be exactly what this employer is looking for, or might be exactly what this role requires in that moment. So being really open and genuinely authentic about who you are and what you bring to the table, I think is what's going to get you the work going forward, right?
Agreed, and on both sides. That is and one of the competitive differentiators that we see in our research every year is about being more transparent and authentic about what you are as an organization, about who you are as a person. So, yes.
Right. Kevin, one just last question. What was the name of the book that you mentioned on employer brand?
No, Give and Get Employer Branding.
Right.
Give and Get Employer Branding. I'm still reading through it, but it's a really well done book. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. What a pleasant, wonderful conversation on this hopefully warm summer afternoon for everybody. Love hearing the perspective and where the industries are aligned and where there's some differences. So appreciate both of you guys taking the time to share your experience and knowledge with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
And
you so
where can I get the download the Jobvite Slow Summer Jam that you played at the beginning? Can I get that later?
We will send it over to you. Yeah, we're going to come up with that Summer to Evolve line dance like we talked about. So yeah, just another shout out to if anybody wants to sign up for the additional Summer to Evolve sessions. Again, we're in week 2 of 12 weeks, so definitely check out jobvite.com or the summertoevolve.com and register for the upcoming sessions. If we can just go ahead on the next slide, just later this week, we will continue to talk about candidate screening. So if you missed it yesterday, there is a class out on YouTube on candidate screening best practices. So definitely check that out. Tomorrow, we'll be doing a Jobvite demo day on how to qualify candidates faster in the application process. And Friday, we're going to have a great Recruiter Real Talk, which is a virtual roundtable, where we're going to talk about the value of recruitment marketing and how it's driving to better candidates for you to screen. So definitely go out and sign up for those. And if anybody has any questions, certainly let us know. Otherwise, thanks for sharing your time with us today and spending the last hour talking with us. Have a great day, everybody.